The conference room felt smaller than usual. 23 pairs of eyes stared at me while Jennifer Lawson stood at the head of the table, her arms crossed, her expression carved from stone. "You're not cut out for sales, Solange." Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Your numbers are abysmal. You've single-handedly jeopardized an $800,000 target. Effective immediately, you're terminated." The room went silent. Someone coughed. Another person shifted in their seat. The VP of operations looked down at his phone. Nobody was coming to my defense. Jennifer slid a manila folder across the glossy table. It stopped right in front of me. "Security will escort you out. Hand over your laptop, your access badge, and sign the exit paperwork." My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. I simply stood up. Bart picked up the folder and looked her directly in the eyes. "That's fine, Jennifer. I hope the pipeline holds up without me." She smirked. That condescending, victory-laced smirk that said she'd won. What Jennifer didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that I wasn't just another sales rep scrambling to hit quota. I was the root architect. Every CRM integration, every automated workflow, every single data structure that powered their precious sales pipeline had been built by me. I had the keys to the kingdom, and I was about to lock every door on my way out. 15 minutes later, sitting in the back of an Uber heading home, I pulled out my phone. One click, one command, one irreversible deletion. The $800,000 pipeline vanished. Every lead, every contact, every deal stage, gone. By the time Jennifer opened her dashboard that afternoon, their revenue had hit zero. Before we dive into how everything unfolded, a quick moment. If stories like this resonate with you, where accountability meets consequences, consider subscribing. We just hit our first milestone, and now we're working toward 2,000 subscribers. This is Payback Office, where the underdog doesn't just survive, they expose the truth. There's a subscribe button on your screen. If this story speaks to you, tap it. Now, let's get into how a single decision changed everything. My name is Solange Winters, and before that catastrophic meeting, I held two roles at Northbridge Solutions: Senior Sales Operations Analyst and Systems Architect. On paper, I was the person who made sure the sales team had everything they needed to close deals. In reality, I was the invisible engine running the entire department. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. My parents ran a small hardware store in Ohio, the kind of place where you knew every customer by name and where a handshake still meant something. My father taught me that respect isn't about titles. It's about how you treat people when nobody's watching. My mother showed me that empathy isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Those lessons stuck with me. Even as I climbed the corporate ladder, even as I earned certifications in Salesforce, HubSpot, and advanced SQL, I never forgot where I came from. I never treated the interns like servants. I never dismissed the janitor or the receptionist. I remembered birthdays. I asked about families. I showed up. That's probably why it stung so much when Jennifer Lawson walked into Northbridge 18 months ago and immediately started treating people like disposable assets. She was a classic corporate climber, Harvard MBA, 6 years at a Fortune 500 tech company, and a reputation for turning around underperforming teams. Translation: she fired people fast and asked questions never. From day one, Jennifer made it clear she didn't value collaboration. She valued results. And if you weren't delivering them on her timeline, you were out. I tried to work with her. I optimized the CRM. I built automated reports. I streamlined the lead scoring system so the sales team could focus on high-value prospects. I even created a custom dashboard that gave her real-time visibility into every deal in motion. She never said thank you. Not once. Instead, she started micromanaging. She questioned my methods. She implied I was too technical and not commercial enough. When I pushed back on a decision to slash our customer support budget, she told me to stay in my lane. I should have seen the writing on the wall. Jennifer didn't just manage poorly. She cultivated toxicity like it was a corporate strategy. Within 6 months of her arrival, the entire culture at Northbridge had shifted. The open-door policy disappeared. The collaborative atmosphere evaporated. People stopped sharing ideas in meetings because Jennifer would either shoot them down immediately or steal them and present them as her own. I watched good people leave. Employees who'd built real value walked away because the environment became unbearable. But Jennifer's favorite targets were the people she saw as threats. And somehow, despite keeping my head down and just doing my job, I ended up in her crosshairs. It started small. She'd schedule meetings during my lunch break, then act surprised when I mentioned I hadn't eaten. She'd send urgent requests at 9 p.m. and expect responses within the hour. She'd ask for detailed reports, then never read them. Then it escalated. She started excluding me from meetings where my input was critical. I'd find out about major system changes after they'd already been decided. When I'd raise concerns about technical feasibility, she'd dismiss me in front of junior staff members. Solange always finds problems instead of solutions, she'd say with that practiced smile. We need people who can execute, not people who overthink. The irony was staggering. I'd built the entire infrastructure she relied on. Oh, every time she bragged about her team's efficiency, she was bragging about systems I'd created. Every time she showed impressive metrics to the executive team, she was presenting dashboards I'd designed. But recognition never came. Only criticism. There was a moment, about 2 weeks before the termination meeting, when I almost quit on my own terms. I'd been working on a critical update to the reporting system, something that would save the sales team about 10 hours per week in manual data entry. I'd put in extra hours, tested every scenario, and prepared a presentation for the leadership meeting. The morning of the meeting, Jennifer pulled me aside. "I'm going to present your report today," she said casually, like she was doing me a favor. "You're not really a public speaker, and this needs to land well with the executives." I stared at her. "I've presented to executives before. I built this system. I should be the one explaining it." She put her hand on my shoulder in a gesture that was probably meant to seem supportive, but felt condescending. "Solange, you're brilliant with technology, but business communication isn't your strength. Trust me on this." She presented my work, complete with slides I'd created, using talking points I'd written. The executives loved it. They praised Jennifer's innovative approach and strategic thinking. She soaked up every word of it. My name wasn't mentioned once. After the meeting, I went back to my desk and started documenting everything. Every project I'd completed, every system I'd built, every contribution I'd made. I created a detailed log with timestamps, email receipts, and technical specifications. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it, but some instinct told me I'd need proof, a paper trail. So evidence that I wasn't just a supporting character in Jennifer's success story, I was the author of it. That documentation would prove more valuable than I could have imagined. The trouble started 3 months before I was fired. Northbridge had just landed a major contract with a logistics company, Summit Freight Solutions. It was worth $800,000 annually, with potential to scale to over $2 million within 3 years. Jennifer took full credit for the deal, even though it was actually closed by one of our senior account executives who'd been nurturing that relationship for 18 months. Jennifer positioned herself as the mastermind. She gave interviews to the company newsletter. She presented the win at the quarterly all-hands meeting. She even hinted that this deal would fast-track her to a C-suite position. But there was a problem. The contract required a level of CRM customization and data integration that our current infrastructure couldn't handle. Summit Freight needed real-time shipment tracking, automated invoicing, and dynamic reporting across 4 regional offices. It was complex, and it was my job to build it. I told Jennifer it would take 8 weeks to do it right. She said I had 3. "Solange, I don't need perfection. I need it done. Summit is expecting a demo in 3 weeks, and if we don't deliver, we lose the contract. I worked 16-hour days. I skipped weekends. I barely slept. I pulled in favors from developers I knew. I tested and retested every integration. And somehow, miraculously, I delivered. The demo went flawlessly. Summit's COO was impressed. Jennifer sent a company-wide email praising her team's execution. My name wasn't mentioned. I let it go. I told myself that recognition didn't matter, that doing good work was its own reward. Then the invoicing errors started. 2 weeks after the system went live, Summit's finance team reported discrepancies. Invoices were being generated with incorrect line items. Some shipments weren't being tracked. A few regional reports were pulling outdated data. I investigated immediately. The problem wasn't my build. It was the data inputs. Jennifer's sales team had been entering information inconsistently. Different naming conventions, missing fields, duplicated records. Garbage in, garbage out. I flagged the issue in our weekly ops meeting. I showed Jennifer the audit trail. I explained that the system was working exactly as designed, but the team needed training on proper data hygiene. She didn't want to hear it. This is your system, Solange. You built it. You own it. If it's not working, that's on you. I tried to explain again. She cut me off. I don't have time for excuses. Summit is threatening to pull the contract. Fix it. Now. So I did. I stayed late. Again. I manually cleaned up thousands of records. I created data validation rules to prevent future errors. I built a training guide and scheduled sessions with the sales team. The errors stopped. Summit was satisfied. The contract was safe. Jennifer didn't acknowledge any of it. Instead, a week later, she called me into her office and told me I was being placed on a performance improvement plan. Your inability to anticipate system issues is concerning, she said, sliding a document across her desk. Yenny, you'll have 60 days to demonstrate improvement. If you don't meet the outlined objectives, we'll have to reconsider your role here. I stared at the document. The objectives were vague, subjective, and nearly impossible to measure. It was a setup, a paper trail, a legal cushion for an inevitable termination. I signed it anyway. What choice did I have? For the next 60 days, I worked harder than I ever had. I documented everything. I exceeded every technical benchmark. I kept my head down and avoided conflict. But Jennifer kept moving the goalposts. Every time I met an objective, she'd add a new one. Every success was reframed as expected baseline performance. The performance improvement plan was designed for failure, and Jennifer knew it. But I played along, documenting every single thing I did. I sent weekly summaries to HR. I copied Jennifer on every communication. I wanted a record that showed I'd done everything possible to meet her impossible standards. Meanwhile, I started preparing for the inevitable. I created a complete backup of all my documentation on encrypted personal storage. I downloaded copies of every system specification, every workflow diagram, every piece of code I'd written. I also started mapping out the dependencies. What would happen if I left? What systems relied on my knowledge? What processes would break? The answer was almost everything. And then came the quarterly review meeting, the execution. Jennifer had clearly planned it as a performance. She wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses. She probably thought that publicly firing me would send a message to the rest of the team. What she didn't realize was that she was giving me the perfect justification for what came next. The Uber ride home took 23 minutes. For the first 10, I just stared out the window, processing what had happened. The humiliation, the injustice, the absolute audacity of Jennifer standing in front of 24 people and lying through her teeth. Then something shifted. The fog of shock cleared and cold calculation took its place. I'd spent 60 days preparing for this moment. I had backups of my documentation. I had proof of my contributions. I had detailed logs of every system I'd built and every problem I'd solved. But more importantly, I had access. When IT sets up technical roles, they create layers of permissions. Standard users can view and edit data. Managers can approve and delete. Administrators can configure settings. And then there are root architects, the people who build the system from the ground up. Root architects have access to everything: the database, the integrations, the API keys, the backup protocols, every single piece of the infrastructure. Jennifer had never worked in technology. She didn't understand the difference between revoking someone's user account and actually removing their architectural access. To her, taking my laptop and badge meant I was locked out. She was catastrophically wrong. I'd built Northbridge's entire CRM infrastructure on cloud-based platforms. Salesforce for customer data, HubSpot for marketing automation. Custom AP is connecting to their accounting software, their inventory management system, their communication tools. Everything talked to everything else in a complex web of integrations that I'd spent 2 years creating. And I'd configured all of it using administrative credentials that were tied to my personal encrypted accounts, not just my company email. Standard security practice would have been to create a dedicated admin account owned by IT, then grant me temporary access. But Northbridge didn't have a sophisticated IT department. They had an outsourced help desk that handled password resets and laptop imaging. I was IT. I was the architect. I was the administrator. I was everything. And nobody had thought to revoke my access at the architectural level. By the time the Uber pulled up to my apartment building, I'd made my decision. This wasn't about revenge. This was about consequences. This was about showing Jennifer and companies like Northbridge that you can't build your success on someone else's back and then discard them when it's convenient. This was payback. I walked into my apartment, set down my personal items from the office, and opened my laptop. The VPN connection took seconds. My credentials still worked. And just like that, I was looking at the back end of every system I'd ever built for them. I didn't rush. This needed to be thorough. First, I navigated to the Salesforce admin panel. The entire sales pipeline was there. Hundreds of leads, dozens of active deals, thousands of contact records. Summit Freight's account alone had over 300 individual data points tracking shipments, invoices, and regional performance metrics. I opened the data management console and selected all records associated with active deals. 847 records, representing not just the 800,000 from Summit, but millions more in potential revenue from other clients. My cursor hovered over the delete button. I thought about every person Jennifer had stepped on, every contribution she'd stolen, every employee she'd humiliated, every ounce of work I'd poured into building something excellent, only to be blamed when other people couldn't use it properly. I clicked delete. A confirmation dialog appeared. This will permanently remove 847 records. This action cannot be undone. Are you sure? I clicked yes. The screen refreshed. The pipeline was empty. But I wasn't done. Next, I went into the custom integrations I'd built. The API connections that automated data flow between systems. The webhooks that triggered actions. The scheduled reports that Jennifer loved showing to executives. One by one, I disconnected them. Then I moved to the automation workflows. The lead scoring system that prioritized high-value prospects. The email sequences that nurtured cold leads. The task assignments that routed opportunities to the right salespeople. I deleted every single one. Finally, I went into the reporting infrastructure. The custom dashboards. The real-time metrics. The forecasting models. All of it. Gone. The entire process took less than 15 minutes. When I was finished, Northbridge's CRM was still technically functional. Someone could log in, manually enter a contact, and manually track it through deal stages. But every advanced feature, everything that made their sales operation efficient and scalable, had vanished. They were back to square one, except they didn't have me to rebuild it. I cleared my access logs, closed the VPN, and shut my laptop. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and waited. The first text came 90 minutes later. What happened to the CRM? Everything's gone. Jennifer is losing her mind. I didn't respond. More texts followed. Calls from coworkers, even an email from someone in IT asking if I'd noticed any system issues before leaving. I ignored all of it. By the next morning, my phone had 43 missed calls and dozens of messages. Most were from Northbridge. I turned off my phone and started planning my next move. By the next morning, the Northbridge's sales operations had ground to a halt. The team couldn't access contact information. They couldn't pull deal histories. They couldn't generate reports. Summit Freight, already frustrated by earlier issues, started asking questions. Other clients followed. Jennifer called an emergency meeting. She brought in IT. She brought in external consultants. She tried to recover the data from backups. But here's the thing about cloud-based systems. If you know what you're doing, you can delete backups too. I'd been thorough. The consultants told her it would take weeks to rebuild the pipeline manually, assuming they could even recover the data from external sources like email threads and spreadsheets. In the meantime, the sales team was flying blind. Summit Freight pulled their contract within 72 hours. Two other major clients followed, citing operational instability. Northbridge's quarterly revenue dropped by 70%. Their stock price tanked. The board called an emergency session. And Jennifer Lawson, the rising star who thought she was untouchable, was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into gross mismanagement. I didn't gloat. I didn't send anonymous tips to the press. I just moved on. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a recruiter. A competitor of Northbridge, Apex Analytics, had heard about my work and wanted to bring me on as their director of sales technology. The salary was nearly double what I'd been making. The role came with equity. And the CEO personally assured me that they valued people who built things, not just people who took credit for them. I accepted. Starting at Apex felt like stepping out of a dark room into sunlight. The differences were immediate and obvious. In my first week, I met with every department head, not to present to them, but to listen, to understand their needs, to identify where technology could solve real problems instead of creating new ones. My first project was rebuilding their lead management system. I spent 2 weeks just in discovery, talking to salespeople, watching how they actually worked, identifying pain points. Then I built something elegant, something intuitive, something that made their jobs easier instead of adding unnecessary complexity. When I presented it to the leadership team, the CEO asked me to walk through my decision-making process. He wanted to understand not just what I'd built, but why. After the presentation, the COO pulled me aside. That was exceptional. Not just the system, but the way you explained it. You made complex technology accessible. That's rare. Public recognition, shared credit, collaborative success. It was everything Northbridge should have been and never was. Meanwhile, Northbridge continued to spiral. They'd hired a new sales ops team, but without documentation of the original architecture, they were essentially building from scratch. The consultants they'd brought in were charging premium rates and delivering mediocre results. More clients left. Several key salespeople jumped ship to competitors. Through my network, I heard regular updates. How Jennifer had tried to blame IT for the data loss. How the executive team had eventually figured out that the infrastructure problems all traced back to one person's termination. 6 months after I started at Apex, I was promoted to senior director with expanded responsibilities. I was now overseeing not just sales technology, but marketing operations and customer success platforms. I had a team of 8 people working under me, and I managed them the way I wished I'd been managed. I credited their work publicly. I advocated for their ideas in leadership meetings. I protected them from unreasonable demands and impossible timelines. Jennifer's career effectively ended. After her administrative leave, Northbridge quietly let her go. She updated her LinkedIn with vague language about pursuing new opportunities. But months went by without a new position. The industry is smaller than people think. Word gets around. You can't build a career on other people's work forever. Eventually, the foundation crumbles. Looking back, I don't regret what I did. Some people might call it revenge. Others might call it justice. I call it consequences. Jennifer Lawson spent her entire career stepping on people to climb higher. She treated employees like tools, useful until they weren't, then discarded without a second thought. She built her success on the backs of others and never once acknowledged the hands that lifted her up. She thought she was untouchable because she had the title, the MBA, the boardroom presence. But titles don't build systems. People do. And when you disrespect the people who actually make things work, eventually, it all falls apart. What happened at Northbridge wasn't just about me getting fired. It was about a culture that rewarded credit takers over creators, a culture that valued optics over outcomes, a culture where loyalty was a one-way street. I didn't destroy that culture. I just exposed it. When the pipeline disappeared, it revealed how fragile their entire operation really was. They'd built a house of cards on the foundation I'd created, and when I removed that foundation, everything collapsed. The truth is, Northbridge could have prevented all of this. If Jennifer had treated me with basic respect, I would have stayed. If she'd acknowledged my contributions, I would have kept building. If she'd listened when I flagged problems instead of blaming me for them, we could have been a great team. But she didn't. There's a lesson in all of this. And it's not just about revenge or getting even. It's about knowing your worth. It's about recognizing when a situation is toxic and having the courage to walk away, even if walking away means burning a bridge. Too many people stay in bad jobs because they're afraid. Afraid of the gap in their resume. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of what people will think. But fear is just a story we tell ourselves. And sometimes, the scariest thing you can do is also the most liberating. When I deleted that pipeline, I wasn't just erasing data. I was erasing the power Jennifer had over me. I was reclaiming my agency. I was saying, you don't get to treat me like this and walk away unscathed. Did it cost Northbridge millions? Yes. Did it ruin Jennifer's career? Probably. Do I lose sleep over it? Not for a second. Because at the end of the day, I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't breach a contract. I didn't steal proprietary information. I simply removed the work I had created, work that was never properly credited, never fairly compensated, and certainly never appreciated. Some people build things, some people break things, and some people just take things. Jennifer was a taker. And when the thing she was taking disappeared, she had nothing left. I was a builder. And when I left, I took my skills, my knowledge, and my integrity with me. That's something nobody can delete. You are not your job. You are not your title. You are not what your boss says about you in a performance review. You are the sum of your skills, your values, and your choices. And when someone tries to diminish that, you have every right to walk away and take your value with you. The workplace isn't a family. It's not a charity. It's a transaction. You exchange your skills and time for compensation and opportunity. And when that exchange becomes one-sided, when you're giving everything and receiving nothing but criticism and disrespect, you have every right to stop participating. That's what Payback Office is really about. Not petty revenge, not malicious destruction, but natural consequences. The universe has a way of balancing the scales, and sometimes it just needs a little help. Every person who's ever been undervalued, overlooked, or pushed out by someone taking credit for their work understands this on a fundamental level. There's a breaking point where dignity becomes more important than a paycheck, where self-respect becomes more valuable than job security. I reached that breaking point in a conference room with 23 witnesses. And I made a choice. Was it the right choice by everyone's standards? Probably not. But it was my choice. And I own it completely. When you fire someone who holds the keys to your entire operation, you should probably make sure you change the locks first. They didn't. And they paid the price. Northbridge learned that lesson the hard way. Jennifer learned it even harder. And me? I learned that sometimes the best payback isn't revenge at all. It's success. It's moving forward. It's building something better somewhere else. And if that success happens to expose the fragility of a toxic system you left behind, that's just a bonus. So that's the story of how I went from being fired in front of an entire leadership team to wiping out an $800,000 pipeline and watching a toxic manager's career crumble in real time. If this resonated with you, if you've ever been undervalued, overlooked, or outright disrespected in the workplace, you're not alone. This channel, Payback Office, is built on stories like these: real experiences, real consequences, real accountability. We just crossed our first subscriber milestone, and now we're aiming for 2,000. If you want to be part of this community, hit that subscribe button. No fluff, no filler. Just stories that matter, told the way they deserve to be told. Stories about people who fought back when the system tried to crush them. Stories about consequences catching up to toxic leaders. Stories about dignity, self-respect, and the courage to walk away. This is Payback Office, where the underdog doesn't just survive, they win. Thanks for being here. Know your worth. Protect your peace. And never let anyone convince you that you're not enough, because you are. And one day, they'll realize it, right around the time everything they built on your back collapses.